the Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, SuperSpeed Tunnel. One of these Disney park attractions is not like the others. 3 of the most popular rides of all time, and one that is almost entirely lost to time. Let's set the scene here. The park was Disneyland in Anaheim, California. It was 1977. Humankind had been to the moon. Technology was advancing at an amazing rate. Computers were getting smaller and televisions were getting bigger. The information age was quickly moving towards the digital, and Walt Disney's once progressive vision of the future was starting to be outpaced by what was essentially a future that had arrived. Tomorrowland was morphing into Yesterdayland. The People Mover was enjoying its status as a classic attraction, which could only mean one thing. It was time to transform a portion of that ride into SuperSpeed Tunnel, a section that was intended to give riders the sensation of speeding through a futuristic world of high-speed vehicles. And how did it achieve this? Projectors! It projected cars and motorcycles on the walls, surrounding passengers as they zipped around the People Mover vehicles, creating the illusion of speed. A few years later, in 1982, SuperSpeed Tunnel was rethemed to then hot new Disney movie Tron, and renamed to the Game Grid Tunnel. Attractions come and go, but some not only don't have the physical staying power, they also fail to make a long-term impression in our brains. It's like the Men in Black showed up and flashed us, removing any lingering memory of the ride. Also, Men in Black flashing us is way dirtier sounding than intended. These are the lost Disney rides you never knew existed. Phantom boats. The Disneyland of 1955 was a wild time. Want proof? They were selling bras on Main Street. That story can be found in my Weird Disney Parks video that I'm linking to right here. When Walt Disney launched his park, not everything was a AAA attraction. Case in point, the Tomorrowland boats were an opening day attraction, but from the start, absolutely no one wanted to ride them. The boats themselves were, well, they were just boats. And there were boats that didn't even work very well. The engines smoked while they ran, which is perfect because when I'm ready to get on a ride, the one thing that I want to be thinking is, hey, will this attraction catch fire? Did I mention that these boats were self-driving? And that most of these drivers were children? You ever see a kid drive something? So essentially, Disney had opened an attraction full of little torpedoes that barely worked as advertised. After a few months of operational issues, the attraction was closed to refurbish it into something way more dazzling. In August of 1955, the boats reopened as the Tomorrowland Phantom Boats. And all of the issues were completely fixed, which is something I would have said if not for the fact that all they did was slap some rocket fins on the boats and give them a colorful new paint job. They also threw a boat captain in the back seat to ferry passengers around the lagoon. Go ahead, put your kids on a boat piloted by a carny and wave goodbye as he whisked them off to the high seas. That's how new pirates are made. The boats continued to overheat, and operationally they were becoming more and more expensive. In 1956, the attraction closed for good. But don't worry, eventually this is the spot where the 20,000 League submarines appeared, today known as the Finding Nemo submarine voyage. Hooray for claustrophobia. Flying saucers. Disneyland has a very storied history of launching interesting rides featuring unique engineering that is just a little too ahead of its time. The flying saucers are one of those attractions. Opening in August of 1961, the Flying Saucers earned a place in Disney history as one of the park's most innovative and mechanically complex rides of the era. Coming out of the 50s, America was in love with UFOs. Sci-fi movies were all the rage, the space race was in full swing, and nothing was more captivating than the idea of interplanetary travel. Disney loves to give the people what they want, because that often leads to great big fistfuls of dollars. Disney loves fistfuls of dollars. Walt Disney was eager to offer his guests the sensation of hovering and freely moving just above the ground. Each saucer was a single seat and resembled an inflatable hovercraft. The real innovation was the special pneumatic surface filled with little vents, High-pressure air was forced up through the vents, causing the cushion of air that allowed the saucers to float. Shifting your weight tilted the saucer and let guests maneuver them in different directions. Basically, what Disney had created was a new form of bumper cars that existed on a giant air hockey board. And just like air hockey, the vehicles didn't really react that well to precise controls. Not to mention, it was another costly ride to operate and maintain. In 1966, just 5 years after debuting, the ride was closed to make way for the redesign of Tomorrowland. Its replacement? The Tomorrowland stage. Can you imagine how sad you'd be if your job replaced you with a stage? Because this is Disney, they tried the same concept again with Luigi's Flying Tires at DCA, proving that even bad ideas can be made into worse attractions if they put their minds to it. That ride had an even shorter shelf life, lasting only 3 years. At least this time it wasn't replaced by a stupid stage. Rocket rods. It's insane how many of these forgotten attractions were located in Tomorrowland. Let's take a look at one attraction that's a little more high profile, a little more known. In 1998, Disney once again refreshed Tomorrowland with a huge overhaul. The key component was a new twist on the People Mover. Let's pause here for a minute and talk a bit about the People Mover. Debuting in New Tomorrowland at Disneyland in 1967, it was conceived as a prototype for future public transportation. It differed from what would eventually open in the Magic Kingdom. It had a shorter track, and probably the biggest difference, Disneyland's used rubber wheels, while MK's featured linear induction motors. Also, I have no idea what a linear induction motor is, so let's just assume that it made for a smoother ride that was easier to maintain. I don't know. And that's probably the main reason, not that Disney hates the Disneyland People Mover, that they chose to close the West Coast version in 1995. Not to mention, it was the 90s and everything had to be extreme. We're talking Mountain Dew commercial levels of extreme. And that trickled down to the People Mover. Rocket rods were the high-speed replacement the guests craved. Opening in May of 1998, the rocket rods used the People Mover track to take Disneylanders on a thrilling hot rod trip of the future. Vehicles would accelerate quickly in straight sections, but when it was time to hit those curves, the speed would drop. Why? Because the track remained flat. For speed like that, you'd need banked corners or your fancy little hot rod is going to fly right off the tracks like it was a Final Destination movie. Usually, guests think negatively about being fatally injured on their thrill rides. Oh, and they also just plain didn't work. They were plagued by mechanical and technical issues, plus it replaced a ride with a high capacity with one that fit just 5 people per car. Take a popular new ride, add in frequent closures, and you're going to get long wait times. Not to mention the biggest problem, the old People Mover track couldn't handle the rocket rods. Now you've got an attraction that's causing stress on an elevated track that runs above thousands of guests. It was a complete disaster. After 2 years of intermittent operation, the rocket rods temporarily closed in 2000. Unfortunately, the refurbishment was going to prove impossible, and the rocket rods never reopened. The track remains in Disneyland's Tomorrowland, and fans continue to be hopeful about the return of an updated People Mover. It just seems that the track might be too damaged for that. But it won't stop those who want to enjoy a nice, leisurely ride through the future. I need to go page Mr. Morrow, Mr. Tom Morrow. I get that now. Oh, that's a joke. Okay. America Sings. Who doesn't love the Carousel of Progress? It's one of a handful of attractions that Walt Disney himself helped build for the 1964 World's Fair. It features audio animatronic technology that would eventually become one of Imagineering's greatest innovations. And in 1974, they packed it all up and moved it across the country to the Magic Kingdom. That left them with a huge, rotating theater that didn't have a show. Hey, no biggie, because Disney legend Mark Davis was around to conceive a new show. A lighthearted journey through the periods of American music, from folk songs to early rock. That attraction? America Sings. It was a patriotic and nostalgic tribute designed just in time for the American Bicentennial in 1975. Hey, how lucky is that? Oh, it was a planned bicentennial? Okay, I guess that makes more sense than a lucky stroke of coincidence. The show was hosted by a charming bald eagle named Sam, but really, aren't all bald eagles charming? I just don't understand why we named them all Sam. The show featured a cast of over 100 audio animatronic animal characters, a huge increase from the humble carousel it replaced. The memory of this attraction, however, is marred by a tragic accident, which has unfortunately become its lasting legacy and the thing that it's most remembered for. A little more than a week after the attraction's debut, 18-year-old cast member Deborah Gale Stone lost her life when she was caught between the moving theater wall and the stationary section. Disney immediately modified the attraction to prevent an accident of that kind from ever happening again. On a more positive note, when America Sings finally closed in 1988, several of the show's animatronics were repurposed for Splash Mountain, where they can be seen today. What? Tiana's Bayou Adventure? Oh, I didn't realize. I would have assumed that there would have been more of an announcement for something like that. Did no one cover that at all? Was there no news? Just silent, huh? Weird. Junior Autopia. Disneyland loved their Autopia, an attraction that was possibly responsible for some of the damage to the ozone layer above Anaheim. They loved the attraction so much that they said, hey, let's build another but make it even smaller. And thus, the Junior Autopia made its debut in July of 1956. Its placement on the edge of Fantasyland helped bridge the gap between the whimsical atmosphere of that land and the futuristic vibe of Tomorrowland. The cars were smaller than the Autopia vehicles, making for a more accommodating experience for younger drivers to handle. Unlike, say, real cars that required 3 children to operate, 1 to steer and 2 to handle the pedals. Also, there was way less chance that they would immediately drive into a building. The track was shorter, the layout was simpler, and eventually a center rail was introduced, probably after kids started jumping the track and heading off towards Adventureland. The Junior Autopia quickly became popular, and a shocking display of inappropriate naming opened the Autopia that was even smaller, letting, I don't know, babies enjoy the responsibility of car ownership? What is this? A car race for ants? By the early 1960s, the version of the Autopia ceased operation. I can't believe I have to bleep Autopia, but I don't trust the algorithm from not flagging me. I would love to know what you guys think that I'm actually saying. I promise you that it is Autopia. The Autopia was closed to make room for It's a Small World, which is really just a case of the jokes writing themselves. It was later donated to Walt Disney's hometown of Marceline, Missouri, a gift from Walt and Roy. The Junior Autopia was eventually renamed the Fantasyland Autopia, where it operated until it was eventually gobbled up by a much larger track that combined them into a singular Autopia attraction. The Mickey Mouse Revue. Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is the first ride featuring Mickey Mouse as the main character. But did you know that it's not the first time that there's been an audio animatronic Mickey in an attraction? That honor goes to the Mickey Mouse Revue, a Country Bears style stage show that was an opening day attraction in Fantasyland and the Magic Kingdom. The show starred a cast of beloved Disney characters performing a medley of classic Disney songs. It was a tribute to the company's rich musical tradition, and it placed Mickey Mouse in the spotlight as a grand orchestral conductor. The show's characters were cutting edge for their time. They performed in meticulously choreographed sequences, singing and playing instruments. There were lighting effects, carefully coordinated movements, and surround sound that created this immersive theatrical ambiance. The show itself featured songs from Snow White, Alice in Chains, that's Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella, and Dumbo. The finale brought them all together for a huge musical celebration. There was no Alice in Chains, it was definitely Alice in Wonderland. After 9 years of operation, its popularity waned, and guests failed to see it as a must-see headliner. Park management decided that it needed to go in 1980. But instead of ripping it out like an HGTV renovation show, they instead moved it to Tokyo Disneyland, where Japanese audiences embraced the show so much that it ran for another 24 years before closing in 2009 to make way for a new attraction. An interesting epilogue to this attraction's story: after 35 years, the 3 Caballeros animatronics, including a maraca playing Donald Duck that I desperately wish I owned, came home to Walt Disney World. where they remain in the finale of Epcot's Grand Fiesta Tour, at least until they turn it into Coco. And in another display of Parks energy, the spot where the original Mickey Mouse Revue stood is now the location of the Magic Kingdom's Mickey's PhilharMagic, the show's spiritual successor. And seriously, that Donald Duck is my absolute favorite animatronic of all time. I'm gonna steal it. Skull Rock and Pirates Cove. You know what I often find myself craving when I'm at Disneyland? A good old-fashioned tuna fish sandwich. And at one time, there was a restaurant that exclusively sold them to those brave enough to consume that much mayo in the hot California sunshine. The Chicken of the Sea pirate ship and restaurant provided an immersive dining experience. The ship, anchored in the lagoon, resembled Captain Hook's vessel, the Jolly Roger. Guests could order tuna sandwiches and then go swab the deck as they ate them. What more could a growing kid want from an attraction? The ship was paired with Skull Rock, offering a tranquil experience compared with the thrill rides that surrounded it. It was the ideal spot to rest, eat, and explore the fantastic theming of the detailed, story-driven environment. The iconic pirate ship, Skull Rock, and Pirates Cove were all removed in 1982. And with it, hopes of consuming tuna sandwiches returned to Neverland, from whence they came. At least I think that's the origin of tuna sandwiches. You feel free to do your own research. The Monsanto House of the Future. Want to know what was cutting edge in 1957? Plastics, the thing that would eventually be the greatest threat to sea turtles. Modern day Disney has made a tremendous effort to remove all non-biodegradable plastics from their parks, but not in 1957. Back then, they were making entire houses out of the stuff. The Monsanto House of the Future was a walkthrough attraction that showcased what a modern, plastic-based home and its conveniences could look like in the distant future of the late 20th century. So essentially, the distant future of 25 years ago. Monsanto. Why does that name sound so familiar? Oh yeah, that seems problematic. In an era fascinated by space exploration, nuclear energy, and modern living, the house aimed to demonstrate how synthetic materials, especially plastics, could revolutionize home construction, interior design, and everyday household tasks, all while probably, definitely, 100% not proving to be potentially dangerous to the overall health of the family living there. I mean, they're going to have to do several more rounds of testing before they're legally able to definitely say that, but I'm sure that all of these quality Monsanto chemicals are completely non-lethal. At a time when the American dream was closely tied to modern suburban living, the House of the Future connected with guest aspirations for comfort, ease, and style in their personal lives. But by the mid-60s, many of the once futuristic features had begun to lose their novelty as real-world homes were gradually adopting things like microwave ovens and DDT. That joke was exclusively for Rachel Carson fans. Look her up. This YouTube channel assigns homework, I guess. The ending of this story is one of the most interesting parts. When the attraction closed at the end of 1967, the structure proved so durable that demolition crews struggled to tear it down. This thing was not willing to give up. The demolition crew eventually had to bring in cables and chains to finally break it apart. I guess that's an unintended testament to the durability of the plastic construction. And there you have it, some of the long-forgotten Disney attractions that once captured our imaginations, but ultimately faded away, forgotten to the winds of change and progress. They still remain an important part of Disney's history and a reminder of the constant evolution and willingness to explore new ideas, even if not all of them are successful. Let me know what lost attractions you remember down in the comments, or drop me a line over at Bluesky. And while you're there, give me a follow. Seriously, I was saying Autopia. I hope that this doesn't get the video banned.